Things you do every day that would get you arrested in the past. Imagine getting tossed in jail just for dancing, sipping coffee, or wearing the wrong color shirt. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, for most of history, ordinary habits we don't even think about today could brand you a criminal. Let's start with the most ordinary habit of all, drinking coffee. The idea that a cup of coffee could once get you punished sounds completely insane, but it actually happened. Coffee first took off in the Arab world, where people gathered in coffee houses to talk, play games, and share ideas. In 1511, the governor of Mecca, Khair Bey, banned coffee because he believed it stirred up trouble and encouraged bold thinking. Authorities closed shops and even burned the beans. Soon after, though, the Sultan of Egypt stepped in, declared coffee acceptable, and the cups started clinking again. The habit spread quickly, and soon the Ottoman Empire tried to stamp it out. Sultan Murad IV in the 1600s even went so far as to order beatings for first-time coffee drinkers, and according to some accounts, drowning for repeat offenders. Despite these threats, the coffee houses kept on buzzing because, honestly, it's nearly impossible to outlaw a warm drink and a lively chat. Europe soon had its own debates as well. In the early 1600s, some church leaders in places like Italy denounced coffee as a satanic drink that tempted people away from proper behavior. But in 1600, Pope Clement VIII himself tried a cup and, according to stories, declared it perfectly fine to drink, which gave coffee a major boost in acceptance. Decades later, in 1675, England's King Charles II feared that people were plotting against him in London's lively cafes, so he issued a proclamation to shut them all down. Merchants and citizens protested so strongly that the order was quickly withdrawn. So why all the panic? Because these coffee houses had turned into little idea factories where people could meet, talk, and sometimes challenge the people in charge. And that made rulers very nervous. And in the next section, we'll see another one that would probably have turned most of your favorite TikTok dancers into criminals back in the day. Public dancing. Dancing in public feels so normal today that it's hard to imagine how often it was restricted in the past. But for centuries, shaking a leg in the wrong place could be seen as immoral, disruptive, or even criminal. For example, in Puritan New England, dancing was condemned as sinful, with preachers warning that it led straight to temptation. In Elmore City, Oklahoma, it was actually banned by law from 1898 all the way to 1980. Even in the 1920s jazz age, some American cities outlawed dancing on Sundays to keep people moral. In 1926, New York passed the cabaret law, which forced venues to get special licenses for dancing. It was used to shut down clubs, especially in black and immigrant neighborhoods where jazz thrived. On top of that, some places even required performers to hold special cards just to work, and authorities would pull them if they didn't like what was happening inside. Clearly, dancing was seen as more than just fun. It was something powerful that worried people in charge. Of course, dance culture didn't stay buried. Over time, dancing became a symbol of freedom and rebellion, and today, it's nearly impossible to imagine life without it. But authorities weren't just worried about people moving their feet in the streets, they kept a close eye on alcoholic drinks too. And hey, if you're enjoying this trip through history's strangest rules, why not hit that subscribe button? It's a totally normal thing to do these days that isn't a crime, right? Drinking alcohol. Grabbing a drink in a park or sipping from a bottle on the street might not turn heads today, but in many parts of the past it could get you fined or worse. Early on, taverns were the main social hubs, and they were watched closely by local leaders. Drinking itself wasn't always banned, but noisy crowds, gambling, or fights outside taverns quickly convinced towns to tighten the rules. By the 19th century, public worries over alcohol had exploded into major temperance campaigns. In the United States, that movement led to prohibition between 1920 and 1933, when making, selling, or transporting alcohol was outlawed nationwide. Public drinking was strictly forbidden, and hidden bars popped up everywhere. Canada and parts of Europe also had their own bans and heavy restrictions, but just like with coffee houses and dancing, people kept finding ways to sneak around the rules. Even after Prohibition ended, many places held onto laws against public drinking to keep streets orderly. Some cities in the United States and countries like Japan and Singapore still enforce restrictions today, usually allowing alcohol only in licensed areas or during special events. The reasoning has always been the same: keep things calm, limit noise, and stop drunken brawls before they start. Now that we've mentioned you couldn't dance and you couldn't drink alcohol, let's raise the level a bit. What if I told you there was even a time limit on when you could walk outside? Walking outside at night. The word curfew comes from the old French term couvre-feu, which means cover the fire. In medieval England, this wasn't just a saying. Around the 11th century, King William the Conqueror ordered a bell to be rung at night, usually around 8 or 9 p.m., signaling people to cover their fires and head indoors. On the surface, this was about fire safety, but it quickly became a tool of control. Once the bell rang, walking outside without a good reason or a special license was seen as suspicious and could land you in trouble. Breaking curfew could mean fines, a night in jail, or even harsher punishment if you were caught repeatedly. Authorities saw night wandering as risky because it could hide crime, rebellion, or secret gatherings. So, the curfew bell became both a symbol of safety and a reminder that freedom stopped when the sun went down. These rules didn't stay stuck in the Middle Ages either. Versions of curfews kept popping up through history, from wartime blackout rules to youth curfews in modern cities. The idea was always the same: keep people under watch after dark. But we're not done yet. Even a harmless sound like a whistle could get you in trouble in some places in the past. Whistling. Whistling has carried a strange reputation for centuries. In many cultures, doing it at night was thought to summon evil spirits or bad luck. In Turkey, people said it could even call the devil. So, if you were wandering around after dark and started to whistle, folks might look at you like you were tempting fate, or even worse. By the 1800s, England had its own no whistling zones. In London's Burlington Arcade, whistling was banned for over 200 years because pickpockets used coded whistles to signal each other about patrolling guards. Breaking the rule can result in getting fined on the spot or even getting banned from that location. The rule was taken so seriously that only a tiny handful of people were ever granted special permission to whistle there. Whistling was also restricted in other tense moments like World War I. In the UK, taxi drivers were banned from whistling because the sound could be mistaken for air raid signals, which could send entire neighborhoods into panic. So whether it was superstition, crime prevention, or simple annoyance, whistling was often treated as something suspicious. It wasn't usually punished with harsh sentences, but it could still get you fined, tossed out, or branded as a troublemaker. Now, let's turn to how something as simple as kicking a ball with the boys could have earned you a ticket to prison. Playing football. Medieval football in England wasn't the neatly organized game we know today. It was closer to a free-for-all brawl that could sprawl across fields, markets, and even entire villages. With no clear rules or boundaries, matches often drew hundreds of players, and the results could be brutal. Broken bones, smashed fences, even the occasional death weren't unusual outcomes of what was supposed to be a game. Authorities hated it. In 1314, King Edward II banned football in London, complaining that the games caused huge noisy crowds, constant fights, and general chaos in the streets. Then, in 1363, King Edward III went even further, threatening imprisonment for anyone caught playing. His reasoning wasn't just about noise and chaos. It was that young men were playing football instead of practicing archery, which the crown considered vital for national defense. Later, in 1541, Henry VIII also outlawed it for apprentices, linking the game to disorder and wasted time. Contemporary writers didn't mince words either, calling it a sport of beastly free and extreme violence. Records even mention players stabbing each other with hidden knives or daggers during the chaos. Despite all this, football never really disappeared. It kept being played at local festivals and village gatherings, eventually evolving centuries later into the modern sport that billions of people love today. Let's now switch to clothing rules that could have landed most women in handcuffs if they were enforced today. Wearing swimsuits. Clothing laws from the past make today's dress codes look like a free-for-all. Believe it or not, something as simple as wearing a swimsuit could once get you arrested. Starting as early as the 1600s, courts in England treated exposing too much skin in public as a crime, and by the Victorian era, the rules got even stricter. Women were expected to cover their arms, shoulders, and even their legs at all times, and going to the beach didn't change that. You had to swim in heavy fabric outfits that covered you from neck to knee, sometimes even down to the ankles. By the 1800s and early 1900s, laws against indecent exposure were written into statutes. They didn't just target nudity, but anything that might offend public decency. That meant if society thought your clothes were too shocking, you could be fined or even hauled off by the police. Courts often judged these cases using what they called community standards of tolerance, which is a fancy way of saying, what would your neighbors be okay with seeing? Things started loosening up in the 20th century, especially by the 1930s and 40s when swimsuits slowly got smaller. But showing a navel or going topless on beaches was still scandalous and in some places illegal. Different cultures also had their own rules. While some European and South American beaches allowed topless sunbathing, other countries stayed strict for decades longer. By the early 2000s, most old indecency laws had been replaced with modern ones that focus more on intent and whether someone's trying to alarm or offend, rather than just how much skin is showing. Still, it's wild to think that a normal beach outfit today could once have been grounds for arrest. And if the swimsuit rules sound strict, wait till you hear about how even the color of your clothes could get you in trouble. Dressing in purple. Out of all the clothing rules in history, the purple ban might just be the most dramatic. For centuries, only the most powerful people were allowed to wear purple clothes, and breaking that rule could cost you your freedom or even your life. Purple wasn't just a color before, it was a royal privilege. The dye itself was known as Tyrian purple and came from thousands of crushed sea snails. Producing even a small amount was so expensive that wearing it became the ultimate status symbol. Roman emperors wore it proudly, and Byzantine rulers used it to mark noble births, and anyone outside the elite who tried to wear purple could face serious punishment, including a death sentence. That's how strict it was. Rulers created these strict clothing laws to make sure ordinary people didn't get too bold. In ancient Rome, purple robes were only for emperors and top officials, and in Elizabethan England, Queen Elizabeth I said only her close family could wear it. Breaking those rules wasn't just a fashion mistake, it was instead treated like a challenge to authority. This control didn't really end until the 19th century when chemist William Henry Perkin stumbled on a synthetic purple dye called Movine in 1856. All of a sudden, what had once been reserved for royalty started showing up in ordinary clothing shops. The monopoly of purple collapsed and the color slowly shifted from being a royal badge of power to a stylish choice for anyone. Even now, purple's royal reputation hasn't disappeared completely. Judges, bishops, and dignitaries still wear it as a mark of authority and dignity. And after all those rules for your coffee, nightlife, sports, and clothes, let's end the video with one last everyday thing that could land you in trouble: eating too much. Back then, stuffing yourself wasn't just rude. It was seen as a serious moral crime. Gluttony was considered one of the 7 deadly sins. The big list of bad behaviors church leaders said could drag your soul straight to hell. Religious thinkers like Pope Gregory I in the 500s and later Thomas Aquinas in the 1200s explained that gluttony wasn't only about eating a second plate of dinner. It meant wanting food so badly that you let it control you, putting your stomach ahead of your faith and your community. The Bible even warns about it. In one part of Deuteronomy, a stubborn child who is called a glutton and a drunkard is described as deserving serious discipline. Medieval towns took this idea to heart. If you were caught throwing huge feasts, wasting food, or drinking yourself silly in public, you might face fines, get stuck in the stocks where everyone could laugh at you, or even get whipped. Writers hammered the point home, too. Dante's famous poem, Inferno, pictures gluttons trapped forever in a disgusting swamp of icy slush, punished for living like pigs. What's interesting is that regular poor people rarely got in trouble for gluttony. They didn't have extra food to waste. It was mostly the wealthy who could afford endless banquets that drew the accusations. In a way, it was like an early version of a white-collar crime. Today, of course, nobody's getting tossed in jail for eating too much pizza. Instead, doctors talk about overeating as a health issue, sometimes even a medical disorder. But in a world where food was scarce, eating way more than your share looked greedy, selfish, and downright criminal. So there you have it. Coffee, dancing, even dinner could once make you an outlaw. If you like this ride through history's weirdest rules, hit that subscribe button and stick around.